So I wanted to talk with you because you wrote this piece in Bleacher Report magazine about Chris Paul, who has kind of had a lot to deal with this year. And I've been privy to watch a bunch of his games and try to figure out what drives him through what I thought was going to be a bad situation for him that turned out to be really great, but also got to display a part of his personality that apparently has been there since high school. So my first question for you was, what did you learn about Chris Paul that you didn't know already?
It's funny, right? Because I live in Charlotte, and so I wanted, like, I knew Chris Paul was like in student government throughout his high school, so I wanted to try and talk to some of his people who knew him back then and the high school administration. So I was trying to get in touch with his high school principal. Now, his high school principal, once I googled his name, he no longer teaches where Chris went to high school, which is like an hour or two away from me. He's a principal at the high school, like literally down the street from me, like probably the closest high school that I live next to. And so I shot him an email and I got an away message and I waited a couple days and I hadn't heard from him. So the neighbors who live across the street from me, their girls all go to this high school. And I asked their mom, I was like, any chance you know how to get in touch with them? And she was like, yeah. So it was like, and then he called me back the next day, and it was just a really weird coincidence. And he said that I knew Chris was like the president of his high school, but I didn't know he was president 3 out of 4 years he was in high school, like from his freshman year or from his sophomore year on. So it was just funny that even now, even today, he has commitments like, you know, arranging their like 10-year anniversary. Like, even though he's an NBA star. He's in charge of that. So he's like has so many obligations and so much stuff that he's handling, and being able to handle all this and be the head of the players union, and I'm sure deal with 450 different personalities and wants and needs, while also being in charge of your own team and being a dad and handling a pandemic. I mean, all this has been a lot for anybody to deal with, but I think he's done a commendable job.
Yes, one of my criticisms of Major League Baseball is how they have handled this, and even the NFL to that degree. But we haven't heard much about friction between the NBA Players Association and the NBA itself. And then the quote that Michelle Roberts gave you, I thought was really eye opening because she's more or less been a hammer for the NBA's Players Association and had to work hand in hand with him. She sounded like she was gushing. What was she gushing to you?
she's she's another one of those people who I think is juggling like 10 different things, because like she was talking to me, it was like a storm in Orlando, and she was waiting in line to get a COVID test. It sounded like she was waiting outside. And she still called me like literally right on the dot where her assistant said that she was going to call me. And so I thought that was funny. It's like two people who like have business and take care of the business that they have in front of them. And I think that Chris was part of the team who hired Michelle Roberts.
Mm.
So, they probably knew going into it that they were going to work well together. But I just, even taking a look back at the Players Association and the union and how it ran prior to Chris becoming president, prior to Michelle Roberts getting in, there was a lot of internal division and friction
Mm.
between Billy Hunter and Derek Fisher and that whole regime. And I think now that we're in such a tricky situation as far as trying to get the NBA back during this pandemic, that they have unity and synergy, and that they get along with Adam Silver. I think that's to the benefit of all the parties that's involved, and it looks like they've gotten this thing back on the verge of coming back the best and safest way possible, if that is even possible.
Yeah, as much as we're all trying to thread the needle on this, it feels like they are giving us a reason to hope that it can actually go on for the next 3 months, at least in the NBA. In reporting this feature, I ask how easy was it for you to try to wrap your head around trying to write something that was deeply reported at a time when movement is so minimal?
I mean, I think that's been the the issue the issue that every sports writer, every media person is facing, is trying to do your job, especially during the period when there weren't any games going on. It's like, how many times can you try to find out what somebody's new hobby is, or what their quarantine life is like? But now that games are going back, hopefully it'll be easier. But you just try to work your phones, try to work your connections. This time I had to ask a neighbor for help.
I mean, whatever we have to do, I know. Twitter's been a godsend for me on that front. So, toward the end of your piece, Chris Paul had some things to say about social justice, and I thought him stacking black African American made me giggle just a little bit. But it was very important to him that he get across, hey, look, this is not going to be a shut up and dribble situation. We know where we are. We know where we are from. I liked hearing that, but I wonder how much of that resonates in how he spoke with you.
Yeah, so I think that was like a call he did with the media a couple weeks ago with,
Okay.
I think, Mashab Roberts and Adam Silver and Andre Iguodala were on it, where they were kind of addressing like how they were going to come back and what they wanted their focus to be on. And I think this is a sincere effort that I think a lot of the focus is going to be on Black Lives Matter and social equality and racial injustice, and things that, issues that are close to these guys' hearts. And even though they're a little bit removed from it, I guess financially wise, being black, no matter how successful you are, you're never completely free of systemic racism. It's not something that your wealth is going to be able to shield you from, and these guys know that.
I've also been interested to see how they are choosing to go about this because movements are not usually pushed forward by folks who are financially set apart. They're pushed forward by people who are on the ground, who are protesting each and every day, who have made it their day jobs, as it were. And watching how these men have chosen to try to get their own experiences across, but also help those who need help financially and otherwise, has been encouraging to see. Last question that I had for you was in talking with Danilo Gallinari, or in just hearing him speak, how much of what his teammates value about him has colored your story?
Yeah, I think he's a guy who's respected by his teammates and generally respected around the league for his work that he's done here. I know he can be I think pest is probably the most accurate way to describe him on the court, and maybe somebody can eventually talk to him about his flopping. Um, I just think of like the one against DeMarcus Cousins was like so flagrant.
Or snitching to the referee? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but that I think he's like one of those guys who you would want on your team, right? Because he's gonna do his best to get you over that finish line, whether he's on the court or whether it's something like this where he's front and center trying to facilitate the best method to get the NBA back up and running again, and ease the concerns of not just his teammates but everybody across the league. And I think he's done a good job, and I think one of his traits in doing a good job is that he's a superstar player who hasn't necessarily catered to the voice and preferences of the superstars, but I think he's been soliciting the voices of everybody across the league, whether it's LeBron or whether it's the 15th guy on the Charlotte Hornets.
Jonathan Abrams is a Bleacher Report magazine writer and author of my favorite book about The Wire, and has really helped me in understanding how high school basketball players transition to the NBA with Boys Among Men. And Jonathan, I so appreciate your work, and thank you for this time.
I appreciate it, RJ. Have a good one.
Yes, sir.